Okay, so as we begin discussing the changes that come with the British when they enter into India, one of the things I want us to understand is why are young British men going to India in the first place, right? What's the benefit of them going? And that's an important question to ask, right? Because India is really far away from Britain in the 17 I mean today, but in the 1700s, right? You're talking about a very long journey around the coast of Africa. Britain in the 1700s is one of the most developed countries in the world, has every luxury a person could ever want. India, by the same token, although has access to the greatness and the great things of China and Asia, not as developed as the British in the 1700s. So then why, right? Robert Clive, who is the first Governor General of the first Governor General of Bengal, India, in the 1700s, right? So if we look back at this, right, where's Bengal? Bengal is sort of northeastern India. It's what today would be considered part of Bangladesh. Um, and he takes over there in 1757 after the Battle of Plassey. And he goes or he retires back to England in the late 1770s, and he will ultimately die in the 1770s, in the mid 1770s. But he comes back to India and he starts writing and talking about why people should go to India. You're going to read this document, but I think just for now, I think it's important for us to talk a little bit about that, right? So he talks about in the first paragraph sort of all of the great things that India has to offer. And we know that India does, right? It has spices, it has silks, it has all the sort of connection to East Asia that we know that it has. And he is considering this, right? And now he's talking about people going, right? So when he in this talks about the age at which people go, and they're 16 years old. I mean, think about that. That's so young that people are going thousands of miles away. But they arrive, and these Banyans, these young men, what the word means. These Banyans, they show up and they have nothing, and they look at people around them and they have everything. So the company here is the British East India Company, provides all of these great things for the people. The British East India Company is supplying all these things for the people, the company workers that go there. And why do they go? Right? They by the time they end, they have apartments that are amazing. They're riding on horses, and even the crazy thing is they have access to champagne and claret. So champagne, obviously, we know is the fizzy um, wine from France, but claret is this sort of fancy wine from Spain. So what is he saying there, right? He's saying that you are in far off India, but you can even get the great goods from back home and access to this, right? These upper class things. So then what is he arguing people are going to India for? They're going to India because they have access to money. In Britain, if you remember, or in Europe in the 1700s and onward, society is very isolated, right? It's not a class system per se, but what happens is if you're born into the working class, you're probably going to die in the working class. You're not going to be able to elevate yourself. So by going to India, you can have access to all of that wealth that you may not have otherwise had access to. And then you can come home and you can be a wealthy man. You can become a wealthy citizen. So you sort of go into the empire because that is your ticket to wealth and your ticket to greater amounts of money. So that's what he's arguing here. And I hope you can see that when you get a chance to read it. The other piece that I want you to read is from a guy named Charles Creighton Haswell. Haswell was a journalist who wrote in Rhode Island, and he wrote a lot about European affairs. And in this, he talks a lot about the size of Britain compared to the size of the Roman Empire. And this is right after, you'll notice the date, right? This is right after, or this is right around the Sepoy Mutiny, right? So when this happens, he's talking about how sort of amazing Britain is, and why would the Sepoys mutiny, right? And he talks about sort of how ridiculous it is for them to do this, right? Again, sort of talking about how great England and how great Britain are. He's pointing out here that the British are bringing all these great things into India. Now, that's true. We'll talk a little bit about the benefits of Indian rule and British rule in India in a little bit, in a couple days. But I think it is important to notice here that the British, that other people are noticing sort of the greatness that the British are and the sort of ridiculousness that the Bengal army has decided to rebel. Aside from just sort of, how could you take on the greatest power in the world, but then also how do you sort of fight for the rights that you think you should be getting. A couple of words I just want to point out here, right? When it talks about the Normans are the William the Conqueror, 1066, who conquered England. A couple of other words. Mr. Disraeli. Disraeli was the Prime Minister of Britain in the 1750s and early 60s. Up here, a couple of words I want to point out, right? A banyan. A banyan is a sort of young man who's working within the enterprise of the British East India Company. Then there's another word that I would like to point out to you, which is the word nabob, which I cannot find. Nabob. So a nabob is what these British young men would call themselves once they had gotten rich. So in Indian culture, there's a nawab, which was a Indian prince. So these British guys are calling themselves nabobs to give themselves sort of an Indian sound. All right. All right. Now the other assignment that you guys are going to accomplish, right? So you're going to read the textbook from pages 812 to 815, and you're going to answer this question, which is about the Western educated elite, which I finished off in that first video. The next question I want you to look at is, this is the prompt that I'm asking you to answer in about 300 words. No less than 300 words, excuse me. What is the benefit? What benefits did the British believe they were bringing to the people of India, and what benefits did they, the English, believe that they were receiving from India? You must talk about that in 3 different seeds, and you must sort of talk about the different things that are being brought. You should use the video, the documents, and the textbook. All right, good luck, guys.